Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Expo podcast series. As always, I'm Bob Lund, the big guy with Big Guy Fantasy Sports and the Fantasy Football Expo as well. And that guy's face looks familiar. I know you're going, hey, wasn't he on last year? He was, but he wasn't under that name. And we'll get to that in a minute. But first off, I just want to welcome Brian Scott for being a part of tonight's show. Brian, of the That Sports Podcast Network. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Bob. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this year's event, as always.
Absolutely. So for those who are trying to figure out why you know that face, because Brian last year was part of the Fantasy Sports Corporation. Did I say that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So,
Correct.
They rebranded. They're back, and they're excited. And this year, they're a VIP booth sponsor. So thank you, Brian, for bringing the team out again. I know last year you brought a buttload of people, and I know you've got a bunch coming again this year. So thank you for your support, and we appreciate you coming to be a part of this. So, Brian, as we get started, I always ask this question. So talk about you getting started in the fantasy football, playing fantasy football, not the industry. We'll get to that one, but talk about your first experience. Who brought you in? Were you dragged in? Were you excited to be in? How did your first year go? Talk about what year and when you got hooked onto the world of fantasy football playing.
Yeah. Well, gosh, it goes back years. I mean, probably back into college, which, I hate to give away my numbers, but it's got to be over 20 years now.
All right, that's fair.
Well over 20 years, maybe 25 or like.
Well, I'm in year 40, so.
So how it goes. Each year you get further away, you start kind of mixing things up a little bit. But my first fantasy football experience started in college, amongst buddies, as probably a lot of guys have done. But the guys in our network, which you will see some familiar faces with our group this year. You'll see some old faces, some new faces, but they've been doing them, a lot of the guys, way longer than I have. So, and we got guys that have been doing this for 25 plus years, where they've been signing up regularly to the same leagues with friends, or national leagues, kind of like the Scott Fish Bowl, where they've been doing that for years as well. So, we all kind of have a little bit of a different kind of background as far as how we got started with fantasy. And we all kind of have different roles about what we currently do in fantasy. And a lot of guys might remember me from last year because I was also on the medical panel at the Expo.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Glad
you brought that up. I kind of forgot about that. Yeah.
No worries. But yeah, so that's where you might have seen me. I was giving out some injury advice and information about that. But yeah, for me, it's just been year after year, just getting involved in friends and, coworkers, pools and fantasy leagues and things like that. On average, I'll probably do about 2 to 3 a year. Trying to use my injury expertise as like a, advantage, so to speak. I'm not sure if it really does much for me, but I like to think I have a little bit of an edge when it comes to that kind of stuff, at least.
Especially the last, 4 or 5 years. It just seems like, man, the injuries are just, maybe they're not. Maybe it's just,
I mean, if you looked at the statistics, it probably would not be a big deal, but it just seems like every year is a different position where they're getting hit harder than the other spots. And I think this past year, the running backs really took it on the chin, so to speak, more so than ever. And the year before was probably more the receiving core, which is normal. You're going to see a lot of the skilled position players be the ones that are going to take the injuries more so than other spots. But
this year we also saw how injuries to other players affect players.
Correct.
Like Joe Burrow goes down, all of a sudden T. Higgins and Jamar Chase aren't as effective. And if you drafted them, you weren't worried about them getting hurt. The last thing you thought of was Joe Burrow is going to get hurt in this half the season or all.
I mean that was crazy. And that's the thing.
Kind of stuff just shows you, offensive lineman goes down, how it affects the running game. So so I would think you have to, being on top of that, got to give you definitely some edge, because I just kind of go, now what?
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of what our new group of guys in our new network really are good with. We have a very diverse group of guys that kind of focus on a lot of different angles when it comes to fantasy. Me being the injury guy, which a lot of other networks don't have, somebody who actually works in the field, and this is what I do for a career. I've worked in sports medicine and orthopedic surgery now for the better part of 20 plus years. Nice. So I kind of bring a very unique perspective on some things when it comes to fantasy. football in particular. And so we've got guys that kind of focus on the betting aspect of things. We've got women who are part of our group in the Blonde Blitz show with Nikki Gist and Deb Wickus, who both are in the media world of football and know and are very active in that community.
Yeah, so Nikki had talked about coming last year and didn't make it, so hopefully she can make it this year.
We're hoping to drag her there this year.
Yeah, definitely.
But the thing is, we've got a lot of different backgrounds, and all of us kind of do in some capacity have a experience or worked in the world of sport and in and around the NFL to some degree. And so we kind of are able to really touch on a lot of different subject matter related to fantasy football, which is really cool. And we've enhanced the group this year with a few additions and stuff. Some guys that you may be familiar with from some other networks have joined us as well. So it's been a really good group mix and dynamic, and we're hoping to really amp things up when we get to the expo this summer.
Awesome. Well, you kind of took a little bit of the thunder, but let's talk about the creation thereof. So you played a lot of fantasy football. You've been playing for a lot of years. What, Brian, drove you to creating the Fantasy Sports Corporation, which is now that sports podcast network? What brought that idea to your head? And you talked a little bit already, but talk a little bit more about where it's at, how people find it, where people can get a hold, where's the spot to watch you guys and girls.
Yeah. So, it's funny. We all kind of just kind of jumped into a melting pot. We were all kind of doing our own thing. A lot of us, whether it be individually or with other networks at one point in time. And then we all just kind of found each other through mutual connections and contacts. I started out actually just doing a podcast on my own, which I continue to do to this day, called the Injured List Podcast, where I do a lot of injury stuff, including interviews with former athletes, current athletes, sports medicine professionals, and experts in the field. So, I got asked to be a guest on a lot of shows to bring my expertise to the table. And, one thing led to another. A bunch of us kind of crossed paths at different networks and whatnot. And when things kind of didn't work out at one place, in one particular instance, the network I was with folded. And so we all just kind of put our heads together. We had collaborated before and worked well together. And we decided, hey, we should take our show on the road and do our own thing, so to speak. And that's when Fantasy Sports Corporation was developed about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And just due to some changes within the organization and whatnot, we decided to rebrand and remarket. And this year is when we started changing our logo and changed our name to That Sports Podcast Network. But the focus has remained basically, and the mission has remained the same, which is to bring a diverse group of individuals together and try to make it, new compared to what you would see, or different compared to what you would see on the mainstream media stuff. And so we're all over social media on Twitter, Instagram, or X, as you want to call it. And we've got our website, thatsportspodcastnetwork.com. And I've got a blog on there that I do for a small monthly fee, where I do inside kind of more in-depth injury analysis with one of my cohorts, Andrew Leduc, who does kind of a football analysis based off of my injury reports and gives some advice for weekly fantasy rostering and stuff. So Dan's going to be doing a blog for us, Dan Mater, who's currently with Operation Domination and his show, which is one of the best shows I've come across in a long time. And great. Really in-depth, detailed information on the world of fantasy there. Yeah. In fact, you just reminded me, we're doing a special NFL draft live stream event from here in Charlotte, North Carolina on Thursday, April 25th and 26th. So if you want to see what our network is about and what kind of stuff we can do and pull off, tune into that. It's going to be broadcast and streamed live on our YouTube site, That Sports Podcast Network YouTube site. And we'll do a full first round coverage on that Thursday night. Again, that's going to be a live stream. Dan's going to be kind of running the show, giving all kinds of in-depth analysis of the draft picks and how that may affect fantasy rostering and performances. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be on there to do a brief injury kind of segment as well with some of these young draft picks coming into the league and how injuries from last year may impact their ability to step in and basically be fantasy relevant.
So to speak. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. It'll be a live stream. We've got professional video people helping us out. It's going to be a big deal. And we definitely wanted to get that off the ground before the expo, which we hope to do something similar while we're there. I know a lot of guys like to do that. In years past, we tried to do one too, and it was fun. And we got good reception from it. So we're going to try and pull something off like that again. But yeah, everything's on our social media pages, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, thatsportspodcastnetwork.com.
Awesome. Well, everybody check that out. Definitely. This video will be out by then, earlier, obviously. But yeah, everybody check that out. Draft weekend. Check out, Thursday. Is Thursday the first round, right?
Yeah, Thursday, April 25th. I think it's like a 7 or 8 o'clock start.
Yeah, that's usually okay. Yeah, see, I thought it always started on Thursday. Yep. I always forget which days they are, but yeah. Okay. So yeah, this one's early this year. Last couple years, I always tell people I put out my consistency guide and I try to do it right after a week after the draft.
Yeah.
So that it's out, because then I can update everything for what happens. And last 2 years, like the draft ended on May 1st. Like, wait a minute, man. Hey, give me some time. So this year I should have it back out by May 1st and not May 7th. Due to the early times. But yeah, definitely everybody check that out at thatsportspodcastnetwork.com. So Brian, as you mentioned, you were there last year. Talk about Fantasy Sports Corporation, but basically That Sports Podcast Network's your experience. Like, what did you what did you folks think of it? What did you get out of it? To tell people who are watching this that are maybe thinking about it as a fan or even as a content creator, getting a booth, being a part of it. Did you learn new stuff that you didn't know? I mean, obviously, I know a lot of people learned a lot from your Jesse and you and everybody in the medical panel, which is always one of our biggest hits of the weekend. But talk about your experiences at the Fantasy Football Expo, these past years.
Yeah, so so last year was actually my first year. So I was a newbie last year. Yeah, which I kicked myself for not going in years past, because I had a great time. It was awesome to meet everybody in person. Some of these are guys I've been collaborating with now for several years and never actually had the chance to meet face to face, men and women. And it was awesome. I felt like it was a very tight knit community. Everybody was super supportive of each other and what we're all trying to do. There was a lot of collaborative efforts going down. People, scheduling meetings with each other, getting together for a drink afterwards, or just to sit down and talk and chat and figure out how we can all kind of work together and help each other. So it was a really supportive community. I didn't feel any feelings of animosity or like that toward anybody else. Everybody, like I said, super supportive. Everybody was having a great time. And the fans, I think that kind of translated to the people who came as guests, who are just fans of fantasy sports and football in particular. You couldn't ask for a better venue, being at the Hall of Fame and in the Dome there. You had guys like Des Bryant show up, which was awesome.
Yeah, that won't happen this year, but that was cool. Yeah,
it was cool when it did, and we all had a great time. He was a really humble, down to earth guy. Was willing to talk to everybody. He did an interview with one of our guys live, so that was really cool. And just being in and around the Hall of Fame, which is a place I had never gotten to go to before, and so it was great to experience that as well. We took about a half a day and just kind of went through the museum and got to see all the cool memorabilia and whatnot. And I didn't get a chance to really check out as much of it as I would like to. I think I'm just going to buy a ticket this year and just spend some time on my own going through all the finer details of the exhibitions and stuff, because there's so much to see. You really can't cover it all in one day.
Yeah, no. And I'm glad you said those things, because obviously I always feel that way, that, this community is very tight knit, very supportive. There's a lot of stuff. And I know right now there's a lot of stuff going on Twitter. There's people calling out people, and, it's interesting. I will share something, and this is the first time I've ever made this public. So Fantasy Receipts, which is these people on Twitter who seem to kind of get a kick out of, picking on people for their takes. Some people take it personally, get upset. I get it. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Fantasy Receipts people, who I don't know who they are, and then they won't tell me, and that's fine. I'd rather not know, have actually reached out to me on Twitter and told me they've been to the expo the last 2 years.
That's awesome.
And they loved it. Every minute of it. they said what a great community it is, how wonderful everybody was, how supportive everybody was. And they said, but nobody knows that they've been there.
And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And to be honest, I'm waiting for them to come after me because, and I'm open to it. I tell everybody, listen, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. Even in my profession, people think physicians or physician assistants or surgeons or whoever, know all this stuff and everyone's always accurate and 100% right all the time. And that's just not the case. Right. And I make that point very clear to my listeners and to the guys in the group, hey, listen, I'm just going off of what I know, what I read, same information you guys have out there. I'm just putting my spin on it based on what I know and what I've done. But if they want to call me out, I'm happy to accept it in any way, shape, or form they want to deliver it and run with it. It's cool with me.
but it was refreshing that they reached out to me to tell me it was they really had a great time and they really enjoyed the weekend. And
that's awesome.
They do come.
That's cool.
So that'll be everybody's goal this year is to figure out who the fantasy people are. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. But no, I thank you. I appreciate the kind words about the event. That's what the event was always created for in my heart, was to bring people together, to learn from each other. I get smarter listening to you about the injuries. I get smarter listening to people about Dynasty, and hopefully they get smarter listening to me about my consistency model and the players that I talk about. So, I said, we're all fans. A lot of people are like, oh, well, this is all about content creators and that. I'm like, no, we're all fans of each other. There's 750 fans there. Some of them do content creation, but we're all fans of each other. And everybody has to realize that we're all learning. We're all getting smarter at fantasy football because we're learning from people who have a different approach or a different angle or a different skill set like you have in the injury side as an actual sports medicine doctor. And, Dr. Jesse and all those folks, I watch those videos all the time just because I'm like, oh, okay, how does this affect my guy?
And to be honest, Bob, I watch those guys all the time too. I pick up stuff from them as well.
Right.
Sometimes they'll get a take and I'll miss that take, or maybe they'll nail it and I'll be a little bit off of my assessment, and I'll learn from them as well. So it's really cool to see them in person and get to chat with them. Like I said, everyone was great. Never had any feelings of I didn't belong or that people weren't accepting of what I do and what we do as a group. And I think the thing that really kind of made it feel really even more comforting was the fact that I got to meet your wife, your daughter. It was a real family
Both my
affair.
daughters, probably.
Yeah. I think, was your mother there, or one of you?
My mother was there. Yeah, my mother always loves to be there and help. Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see that it feels like a family event, but in actuality it was. And I was like,
my wife, my two daughters, their significant others. My oldest daughter and her husband would be there, but they just adopted 2 boys, so that wasn't going to work out for them. They're a little too young to come help. But my mom's there, her boyfriend. Most of the guys you saw running around were either friends from high school, friends from college, neighbors down the street. I mean, it's like I said, it's one big family affair, and that's what makes it awesome. And we love doing it and they love doing it. So it's a great time. But
you can feel that as a guest. I mean, I felt it right away from the moment I got to the hotel and met up with a bunch of people, and even people I had never met or collaborated with. Once they realized we were all there for the same event, it was like all of a sudden, like, hey, it was like talking to your buddy that you haven't seen for years. Kind of walking into a relationship and a communications with them or discussion with them. It just seemed like I had known these people all my life, and then I was there by myself.
And I'm so glad that that's what it is too, because this year we're adding the sports betting Saturday. So any of your folks who are on the sports betting side, certainly have them reach out to me. We'll get them on some panels. That's going to be Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So that'll be a brand new this year. Very excited to put that out there. So, Brian, as we head towards 2024, what does that Sports Podcast Network have planned for their booth? You talked about some interviews, maybe doing some podcasts yourself there. Talk about your approach to the 2024 Expo.
A lot of stuff still in the works, but we're definitely going to take what we did last year and just try to build off that. We did a lot of giveaways last year. We had some memorabilia stuff
Nice.
that we gave away. We did a raffle for some of that stuff, a 50-50. And we did a live stream during the entire expo in the dome there. Nice. So we did some interviews with not just Des, but also with our colleagues and other content creators and people in the fantasy world. So we hope to do something like that again as well. Maybe up the video and technical feed just to make it better quality. And Dan Mater did a nice big live episode from there. I'm sure he's going to want to do that again this year too. So we got a bunch of things in the works, trying to iron out some details, but we'll definitely be active and round and about.
Cool. That's going to be awesome. All right. Well, Dan, geez, he said Dan and I said Dan.
Yeah, no
Brian, once again, thank you again for being a part of this. Thank you for being a VIP booth sponsor this year. Tell everybody once again, give them all the details for, Twitters and websites and YouTubes and all that. And then we'll take it out from there. And thanks again for being a part of this.
Yeah, my pleasure, Bob. Thanks for having me on. It's thatsportspodcastnetwork.com. If you head to our main page, you'll see all of the people that we have working with us in our network right now. That includes Divots and Pivots, 3P Podcast, Operation Domination, Blonde Blitz, to name a few, Wrestling Addicts. Chris Fox was with us, Patriot Sports Radio. They're doing their thing over on Rumble. We've got a bunch of guys that are awesome, and we're going to all be present at the expo and doing our thing. And TSS Fantasy, how could I forget TSS Fantasy? Cooper would kill me. Just to mention a few. But yeah, we'll be there doing our thing. You can find us on all our social media pages. That Sports Podcast Networks. There's links all over the website to that stuff too.
Awesome. So, well, Brian, thank you again for being a part of this, folks. Of course, go to thefantasyfootballexpo.com. Get your tickets before they go up April 1st. You got 4 days. Get out there, get those before the price goes up on Monday, April 1st. And as always, you can follow the expo on Twitter at the FF Expo, and you can follow me at Bob_ as well. So for Brian Scott from That Sports Podcast Network, I'm Bob Lung. Everybody take care. God bless.